What's going on, everyone? Matt Schaeffer back here from Musaic Design with another build for you. Gotta apologize real quick. It's storming out here. I have no other time to shoot this video. Client's here ready to pick up the car. Just finished the job. Went down to the wire. First Tesla Model 3 audio system. I know you guys have been waiting for it. Let's see what we came up with. So this is the design we came up with the subwoofer enclosure. It's a sealed 10-inch carbon C10 XL subwoofer. Does not take up a ton of trunk space in a sealed box. When it's in the correct sealed enclosure, it sounds like it's in a vented enclosure, which is why, again, I love the subwoofer. One thing that we had to do of note is they basically have a sealed piece of steel here that runs up the top of the bottom of the trunk. And we had to cut a hole where the factory grill is. Now, it's really weird how they have that grill because the bottom of it's actually plastic and then there's a piece of steel. So there is no vent from the trunk to the inside of the car. And obviously to cut back on pressure inside this trunk and resonance, that pass-through was very necessary. And it worked out nice because there's already a grill in the factory rear deck. So it looks factory from the inside because it is factory, but yet we have a massive pass-through here. So really there's not a ton of pressure that builds up in the trunk, creating a ton of pressure, which then leads to resonance. So the transfer function of this subwoofer into the cab is outstanding. Really, really works out well. And we just had to do that mod. We carpeted up here just to make everything kind of look pretty, trimmed it all out accordingly. As far as the colors go, obviously we have white because it's a white interior, accents of red and black, and obviously this is a show car. As you can see from the outside, it's completely bagged, wrapped, so we wanted to do an install that grabbed attention. Obviously you can do this in a much more OEM fashion where it's more stealth. Obviously that is an option. This particular client is doing this to support the show atmosphere, so obviously we have to grab attention. As far as the lighting goes, I felt like this was a very futuristic, electronic feel with the RGB lights, the lines, the geometry. Those hexagons you can actually find under the hood, where that pattern Tesla has underneath the hood. They have a bunch of hexagons, so that's kind of where that was inspired. Obviously we have the Musaic M outlining the focal point, and then off center we have all of these different lights here. The carbon illusion sub is lit up with a white light, so it's just a generic white LED light, and then we have two channels of RGB here in the back. Obviously we have this top, as you can see, it's turning orange right now, and then the one in the back is kind of like pulsating like a cool blue, while we have the white in the background. So there's three different layers of lighting, while we have a ton of different layers of different acrylics, matching vinyl, carpet, all that kind of stuff. So again, just kind of a different take. I feel like it still looks simplistic, even though it's a lot of work into that. But yeah, the simplistic feel kind of goes along with the rest of the Model 3, or any other Tesla for that matter. They're all very simplistic, but yet there's a lot of small pieces that have attention to detail. So sub enclosure, as we can see here, last detail that I should mention is this is a piece of laser acrylic here. This whole piece of acrylic, you can't really see it here, but it's actually arced. That whole thing has a pretty good bend to it, about an 1.25 inches of bend to it. So when you look at it from the back, you can see it in person, but in video it's kind of hard to translate. But in person you can definitely see that arc. We have just a very subtle Tesla T up here. So that basically wraps up the subwoofer enclosure, and then moving on to the floor, which obviously we have the factory removable floor, and then we have the amp rack here. I'm going to spend minimum amount of time on this just because it is storming right now. It's very windy. I can't even imagine what it sounds like in the video. So again, we have the carpet transition, the Musaic M up top, the pop of red, and then we have the two channels of RGB, which is correlating with what you're seeing there. So if you see all the lines right there, how it's blue now, I think about to turn purple, right? About to turn purple. Now we're down here. That's the same channel of RGB. So the lines and the labeling coordinate with the upper sub box panel. And with all that rotating, we have different layers here as well. We have this and this, which are two different layers. That's all the way on the bottom, that yellow. That cool blue is actually the same piece that you're seeing here. This is basically just frosted, so it gives you that cool opaque look through that grill. And in the center we have a fan. As you can see, it's on right now. Whenever the system is on, this fan is running, and basically it's just to kind of circulate dead air that is sitting here. Now these amps do not get hot. They don't build amps like they did in the mid-90s, right, where you could fry an egg on them. These have much more efficient properties to where, you know, they've been running a long time and they're not even hot. So we have a 4-channel FPX Focal here. This is a Class AB that runs a front, mid, and tweeter. And then we have, you can't see it, it's a 5-channel. It actually starts here and runs down. It's a 5-channel which runs the front, mid bass and the rear speakers along with the subwoofer. So that makes up our amplifiers. And again, just to kind of go through some materials, we have the matching vinyl, matching Alcantara suede, our white, our lights, black, red, got a little hidden Focal emblem here. But again, we have so many different layers coming up from the bottom. We have our constant white, which matches our constant white that illuminates that subwoofer. And then of course we go black, white. This is a bunch of different layers here, which is Alcantara, white, white, black, white, white, lit, acrylic, and then we have our top panel. So I mean, let's count them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, like 15 layers with this amp rack. So again, this is going to be the point that it's going to grab your attention, right? This is why it was built. Again, for some people, this is completely unnecessary. I understand that. You can do it in a more simplistic fashion. But again, for those who want to show it off, this is our take on how if Tesla was doing just a badass audio system and didn't really spare an expense. This is kind of how they would do it and make it fit with the vehicle. As far as the equipment, we have a DSP, and I can overlay a picture here of what it looks like, along with all the different fusing, RGB controllers, and all the different things that we needed in order to do an audio system in the Model 3. So the Model 3 is different than the Model S. It's different than the Model X. I haven't done a Y yet, so I can't speak for the Y, but it is very different in how you interface with the electrical system. These cars are extremely sensitive. They have an algorithm that controls the amperage draw of the factory battery. So if it sees anything that's out of the ordinary, then it's going to throw an error message on the display. So with that being said, we had to tackle this very, very carefully. We basically have a circuit breaker underneath the back seat that then runs to an isolator, and with the isolator we're running a 100-watt 5-ohm resistor between both leads. And the reason is when the system isn't engaged, it's still getting a trickle of power, enough to keep the capacitors and the amplifier charged, right? So the problem is that most people run into is when the car dies or when the car falls asleep and all the power is drained, the amplifiers go to nothing. Well, if you've ever installed an amplifier and you connect power for the first time, when all the caps are depleted, you get a spark, right? You get an amperage spike. So that amperage spike a lot of times will trigger the car to say, hey, something's wrong with this battery, right? And by doing that resistor, it's negating that spike, right? It's controlling the amount of power that's running through until the car is on and active, and then our amplifiers are engaged. So have had no problems. I've ran this thing for about 2 weeks now. We always do the install first. That way we can listen to it and critique it and see if there's any problems. It's been, knock on wood, message error free for 2 weeks now. So Again, everything is back there where the factory subwoofer was. It's bolted back there in the factory style. We also have a fan on that just blowing across the equipment just to kind of go overboard with it. But other than that, I mean, it's very factory. We could easily make a board that would go in front of that stuff that he could throw in there if he's traveling with stuff. That way he doesn't damage that, because we actually built this with a stroller in mind to have just enough space to get a stroller in there. So still have all your, like I said, you really don't lose much of anything of what we did back here. And whenever we build a car, its functionality, its serviceability, all that kind of stuff is the first thing that comes into mind when we build something. So with that being said, let's go inside and check out the rest. So I did mention this thing has air ride. The tanks are under the hood. Looks really good. And then we made this panel here in the front to kind of tie the theming of the trunk and of the A-pillars, to bring that to the front and to kind of hide the compressors here, the Viair compressors, which you can see poking right through there. And then there's RGB lights here at night that illuminate all this, but tanks look good. Good job on the different piping. Really good job to the person that did that. And of course, the second I get back in the car, sun comes out, people are frolicking on the beach, and the wind just decided to stop. But in other things, show must go on, so let's talk about the inside. The pillars. This was really cool, and the design of this happened really organically with this car. Again, show car, so we wanted to have a little bit more attention in the work that was done to the vehicle rather than have everything stealth. So in a stealth sense, you can install your 8-inch in the door, and then you have a factory tweeter, which is here, and then you have a factory mid-range, which is on the dashboard, then a factory center channel. So in this case, we just kind of consolidated everything to this general area. We put a C3CX, which is a point source mid-range and tweeter, here in this pillar. So when this was made, if you look at the dashboard, this panel, it's a big arc that runs across the entire dash, right? And it comes around, and if this isn't here, it basically ends here. So that curves around. So we took that natural curve and we built it into our pillar. So when you're looking at this, you would think that it's big, when in reality it's really not. It's the same shape as the factory dash. So it's not like you're blocking your view. It's not really like it's a bigger structure. We're just kind of coming up and conforming to that arc. Same type of grille that you saw in the back. And this grille actually matches this factory grille if you look at it very, very closely. So it's the same sort of thing. You can see the Carbon Illusion C8 poking through that grille there if you look good enough. I can overlay some images of the door and the sound treatment that we did. Ton of deadening in this car just to make it super quiet. Again, pillar here, multiple different layers. The C3CX is kind of recessed in there, which actually works out really nicely. And having that angle, because we're actually getting like no reflections from the windshield. It's not really even in the dispersion pattern of the speaker, as the speaker's like literally right here tunneled to us, which again works out really nicely for the staging. Different layers of acrylic. We have the white, which is our grille. We have the piece in front, which is laser acrylic, and then another piece of laser acrylic with has our branding Model 3 there on the top of the pillar. Now, another reason we built pillars, and this was added to the original job, is we did the entire headliner in Alcantara suede. This was all of that mesh material before, you know, the cheaper stuff. So we did it all in gray Alcantara. This is the same gray that Tesla uses on their other vehicles. So we did the B pillars, the C pillars, all of that stuff. And if you look in the very back, that's the grille that I was talking about, goes all the way across. That big middle section is basically open for that air to come through as a pass-through. Rear speakers we left factory because you don't need to spend money back there. So as far as our different sources go and how everything works, we have our Moscone controller right here. We have 3 different presets. One is the OEM radio, one is the AMAS Bluetooth streaming, and number 3 is our Astel and Kern high-res player. So we can still utilize the MCU just like normal. Nothing changes. Everything works exactly how it was intended. obviously the audio is just way enhanced. As far as preset number 2, that is AMAS. That's a direct Bluetooth connection that's basically not compressed like normal Bluetooth, and it's giving you a perfect digital signal directly to the DSP. And the cool thing about this is you can connect your phone to the Tesla and to the AMAS at the same exact time. And in doing that, you're just directing the audio to the AMAS while still giving the information to the display here. So it's like you're using the MCU, but in fact you're just getting a perfect signal rather than the stitched together signal which we're correcting in preset number 1, right? So preset 2 is ultimately always going to sound better. Anytime that you're using the factory MCU, you're really going to be using preset 2 AMAS, where it looks like you're using the stuff here. We left the center channel on a switch, which we have a switch down here, which just connects the center channel back up to the OEM system. And the reason we do that is so if you get a phone call and you're on preset 2, preset 3, not the factory radio, you can still have that phone chat very quickly on that center channel. You can still get navigation prompts, autopilot prompts, all that kind of stuff there on that factory center channel. So keep that in mind. Preset number 3 is our Astel current high-res player. Obviously we have an analog input. We have our player here, which is giving us the best signal source directly to our processor. And the big difference is this is going to play uncompressed media. It's going to play, DSD, FLAC, 24192, 2496, all the different variations of FLAC, all the different variations of DSD that's out there. And the big thing that you're going to notice with something like this is the space and time of what you're listening to. And what I mean by that is everything gets way wider, it gets way deeper. Again, there's just more space. Like you can actually envision the room size that they've recorded in. You can envision how far away they're standing apart. And all that is done through the DAC, the separation of what this is doing for you. And this is the reason you buy it. It's not necessarily because it's a higher bit rate or quality. It really comes down to the DAC. If you were to play a generic 256 kilobyte per second song, which is what you would download on iTunes, and you played the same file on your phone, it's going to sound dramatically different on this than it is this. So again, it's not so much as the misconception of the file formats that you're playing. It has more to do with the DAC of the player, which is why we're running it analog out of this high-res player directly into our processor, because analog means we're using the DAC of the player and not the DAC of the processor if we were doing it digitally. Now, obviously, we know that we're still going to back to a digital to analog conversion through the Moscone, because that's where our EQ and our processing is for the player, but the signal going in inherently has the qualities of the separation that we just do not achieve going digital out of the player. So that answers your question exactly why we're going analog instead of digital in all cases in which we use a high-res player, because if not, we're primarily just using this thing as a USB stick. It's not why you buy the player. So don't want to take up too much time. Obviously, you've seen a lot of the videos. If you haven't seen any of these videos before, I've done a ton of different Teslas, a ton of different cars, systems just like this, my spin on it. Some of those systems, I go way into the weeds in describing everything about the system. In this case, I think we'll just stop it here. If you have a Tesla, have a project that you want to work on, have questions about your own car, it doesn't matter what it is, you can contact me. Here's my information, my phone number, and then my email address. Also, make sure that you follow our Instagram handles. Here's all 3 of them right down here below. Also, make sure that you check out our website. This is the best tool for anyone to understand what it is we do and how we do it. There's a ton of different cars on here that you can see the full process, the build log, the video tied to it, and in most cases, a testimonial that goes along with the client talking about that same job. So go here. It's the best tool, especially if you're a potential client, for you to understand our potential, what we can do, and kind of our style. So check that out. Also, some really exciting news. We just dropped a podcast. It is called the Old Fashioned Car Audio Pod, and that can be found on Spotify, iTunes, or anywhere else that you download your podcast. It is basically a source where my friend Gary and I talk about different interactions within the shop, different builds we're working on in real time, also going over kind of the history of car audio, as well as making it a good source for clients to understand the questions to ask the shop that they're potentially getting to do their work. Because obviously there's a lot that goes into these builds. There's not a lot of people that take the same attention to detail that we take in these builds. So it's us talking and trying to have conversation and dialogue based on what to ask your shop and general practices that each shop should be doing. So if you're interested in audio, which I'm sure you are because you clicked on this video, go ahead and check it out. I'm sure you're going to love it. Also, if you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe, hit the notification, hit the bell. That way you're alerted anytime we drop a new video. And like always, guys, I appreciate the constant feedback, good or bad. And like always, guys, until next time.